What's up everyone? Welcome to today's video. Today the topic of the video is what type of squat should you be doing to get yourself faster. Now there's a bunch of different options that you have out there and it's kind of confusing. What type of squat should you do? Should you box squat? Should you back squat? Should you front squat? Should you low bar squat? Should you zercher squat? I want to break this down in this video as in-depth as I can and basically give to you guys what I think is the best answer for you to be doing in your training. So before I get into this video, go down below, hit the subscribe button, and check out some of the other videos on my channel. I have a whole series dedicated to improving your speed. If you're an athlete, if you're a team sports athlete, my goal is to make content for you to use so you can get better at your sport. So a little bit about squatting. Nowadays, squatting has really become mainstream, and I think that's great. I think that's awesome. A lot of athletes are getting the barbell on their back, and they're doing things that we've never seen in terms of squats. There's the videos of Saquon doing some crazy 500-pound high rep squats. I've seen Derrick Henry squat 500 pounds ass to grass. I've seen plenty of these athletes doing some amazing things in the gym, and I think that's great. However, something I don't really want to get away from though is squatting isn't really that sport specific. If you've played, I'm sure you could think of a lot of the movements that you do in your sport, and a lot of them, they don't really resemble the shape of a squat or the positions you would be in during a squat, a full depth squat. So although I am an advocate of squatting and getting athletes stronger in the squat, I don't believe that's the end all be all thing that you need to do in order to get faster or get stronger or just get better at your sport. So I just wanted to put that out there. So why do you need to squat? In my opinion, the squat is important because you need to be able to get into certain positions, so from a mobility standpoint, but also in these positions, you need to be able to create a lot of force from the ground up. Now, you may not be creating force in a full depth squat during your sport, but you're going to be creating force in a position during a full depth squat that is at, let's say, a higher demand than most likely what your sport is asking for. So that is, in my opinion, the best way to train to create more force is the squat. So if you're able to do that at full depth, you're going to be able to do that at half depth or whatever position you're going to be in your sport most likely. So the first type of squat I want to talk about is the back squat. Now there's two major types of the back squat, the high bar squat and the low bar squat. The difference, which is pretty self-explanatory if you ask me, a high bar squat is where the bar rests on your traps or otherwise in a high position, and a low bar squat is where the bar rests on your rear delts or a lower position. So because of the bar position, obviously they're going to create a little bit different of a movement. So a high bar squat, because of the high bar position and relative to where it is in your center of mass, it's going to force you to stay more upright, more likely. A low bar squat allows for you to have a little bit more forward lean. So for those people who are restricted in mobility, it's probably going to be easier for you to get to full depth doing a low bar squat. Also, for another point of the low bar squat, more than likely, you're going to be able to use a little bit more weight. A lot of times, high bar squats are just really hard to load up because in that position, you're kind of restricted, and if you get forced to lean forward, you probably are gonna have to bail or ditch the weight. So although the low bar squat allows you to use more weight, in my opinion, the high bar squat is probably the one of the two that you should choose because of the shin angle it forces you to create. If we take a look at the two side by side, the low bar squat allows you to sit back a little bit more. This is because the bar is positioned a little bit lower and allows you to use more of your hip mobility and doesn't force your knees towards your toes as much. The high bar squat in this case, because of where the bar is positioned, is going to force your knees over your toes. It's going to force you to use more of your ankle mobility and create more of a positive shin angle. This shin angle is important to note because it's similar to one you might see in somebody doing a maximal vertical jump or a maximal sprint, or two pretty universal movements in all sports. But like I said, the low bar squat is still awesome. So if you have mobility restrictions in this way, or you just like the low bar squat better, definitely train it. So that's easy. The high bar squat, definitely a squat you should use, right? Well, what about the front squat? The front squat is a very interesting one to me because the front squat creates very similar shin angles to the high bar squat. However, it's definitely harder because you're holding the bar in front of your body versus on your back. So the demands to keep an upright torso are way higher than a high bar squat. The front squat is really awesome at strengthening the core as well. And when I say core, I mean the structures and muscles that protect the pelvis and the spine. So because of these things and the involvement of more muscle groups, the front squat is actually really good to use for, in my opinion, for younger athletes who are also just learning how to squat. But it also has demands on upper body mobility as well. So this is kind of important from a holistic standpoint. Where the front squat is lacking, in my opinion, is in the weight department. So because of the difficulty of the lift, you're not gonna be able to use as much weight. It's just a simple fact. I don't know anybody who front squats more than they back squat that isn't injured and can't back squat. But I do give a lot of points to the front squat because of the fact that it forces you to use almost all of the major muscle groups in order to support the weight and in order to perform the movement. Now going farther to that end of the spectrum, you have the Zercher squat and the overhead squat. So in my opinion, these two lifts are really awesome. The overhead squat forces you to stay upright and is probably the highest demanding in terms of mobility. So if you're lacking in the mobility department, if you can learn how to do an overhead squat, or let's take it even farther, a pistol squat, if you can perform these two movements, you're definitely going to be able to perform a full depth back squat or front squat with no problem whatsoever. And you're going to be able to have a lot of options in terms of mobility at the ankle, the knee, and the hip. So these are things that I suggest you learn how to do, and I suggest you get good at them as well. The Zercher squat, on the other hand, is another one where, in my opinion, it's not really necessary, but a Zercher squat is also another alternative to the front squat. So if you can't get into that position, I know you can also use the arms cross variation on front squat. So that's why I really think it's unnecessary. But obviously, if you're not gonna be able to get your elbows up high enough and you're lacking that level of shoulder flexion, you're not gonna be able to really front squat. The Zercher squat allows you to do that by scooping the weight up into your elbows, and it also forces you to have an upright posture, just like the front squat. So I think that those two movements are very similar, but I just think that it's kind of unnecessary. The one cool thing about the Zercher squat is that it is a little bit different and it's badass. So I definitely suggest, if you like that kind of thing, by all means do it. But I just don't see the Zercher squat being more optimal than a high bar or a front squat for athletes' development. And the last squat I want to talk to you about is the box squat. In recent memory, the box squat has kind of gotten a little bit of a bad rap. And that's because in the powerlifting community, the box squat really isn't specific to an actual squat. If you're using the box squat and you're competing as a powerlifter, it's not gonna help you as much because it's not very specific. It's pretty much very different than a regular squat. So in my opinion, the box squat is actually a really good teaching tool, especially for younger athletes, because if you're somebody that has mobility restrictions or you can't get into a full depth squat, you could do the box squat and you're basically doing the same type of movement as a high bar or a low bar squat in terms of force application. And if you have mobility restrictions, the box squat just puts you there. And you can kind of separate the qualities of, okay, doing your developmental squatting type of program where you're forcing yourself to achieve the mobility of a full depth squat, but you can also reap the benefits of doing a high bar or a low bar squat minus the extra inch or two that you're using the box for. As a variation, the box squat is also pretty cool because it forces you to sit back a little bit more if you do it correctly. And in that case, it's gonna put a little bit more of an emphasis on your hips and your glutes. And I think that a lot of coaches talk up the box squat because of this, but I also think that that's kind of overrated because you can do plenty of other movements like the deadlift that are going to basically do this for you. But I guess the deadlift is pretty hard to recover from. So if you're having problems in the recovery department, then maybe the box squat is right for you. And if I were to rank them, I would probably rank, I'd probably rank high bar and front squat 1A and 1B. I would rank high bar squat 1A and front squat 1B. And that's just because of the mobility required that the front squat forces you to have. Low bar would probably be third. Fourth place would probably be the box squat. Fifth place, I'm gonna give to the overhead squat. Sixth place, I'll probably give to the Zercher squat. Honorable mentions of goblet squat and belt squat. I think those are two awesome leg exercises that you can do. Both are accessory movements for the squat, in my opinion. I think the goblet squat is great because it also forces you to stay upright and allows you to kind of work on your mobility as you squat. And the belt squat is cool because it takes a lot of the loading off your spine and puts you in basically this same position as a low bar squat. So I suggest you take these movements and you see which ones that you like the best and use the ones that are the most optimal for your development as an athlete. So the closer you could get to a front squat or a high bar squat, that's probably going to be the best bang for your buck. But if you have mobility restrictions, you can always do the low bar squat or the box squat, and these are also gonna help you. So that's it. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them down in the comments. Be sure to like this video and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And that's it. I'll see you in the next video.